Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Codebar Stories, the podcast where we sit down with our community members to hear the story behind their tech careers. Before we dive in, if you're enjoying these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps other people find us. A huge welcome to the podcast, Katie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And just thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast. I met you recently at Cobar Festival. You were one of our speakers, and then I asked you to be on the podcast. So before we get into the questions, I just want to say a huge thank you for speaking at the festival, but also being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I want to quickly talk about the festival before we start talking about
Mhm.
yourself. The festival happens every year. What made you want to submit your talk to our call for papers or CFP?
It's a really good question. So I can't remember where I saw the the actual call for papers itself, but I'd just given the talk at a PyCon 2025, and it got pretty good feedback. And I also heard from people that it was really good for anyone in tech, regardless of discipline. And I also actually previously went to a bunch of code bar meetups, like back when I was changing careers. So I think all of that together made me think, oh, do you know what? I'll submit I'll submit a proposal and see if you're interested in having me. And as my luck would have it, you were.
And you opened up the Saturday. So how did you feel going first?
Um, nervous. Yeah, definitely nervous. But I think I arrived quite early and I'd already been chatting to a few of the attendees. So I think that kind of took the edge off a little bit because I already knew there were some lovely people in the audience. So didn't it didn't feel as intimidating, I think, as if I'd just like rocked up and gone for it.
And there was a reason why we put you first, because your talk was all about like doing difficult things and why they're good for you. And I remember when we had our final selection of speakers and you're deciding where to put people, you often don't want super technical ones just after lunch because people may be tired. And we obviously had your title and your description. And I was like, I actually think it's the perfect one to start the day. How doing difficult things is good for you. So yeah, that's what you were deliberately put first for that reason.
Oh.
So yeah, just thank you for that. So yeah, I like I said, I'm really interested to dive into your career, how you got to where you are today. Let's start pre-boot camp, like, because I know you did a boot camp, which we'll talk about after this, but talk me through what you were doing before you did the boot camp.
Sure. So I had a completely different career. So I went to university, I got a biomedical sciences degree, and when I graduated, I sort of fell into what's called medical communications and then latterly medical education. So that was kind of looking at the latest medical research for humans specifically, and drugs, and making, I guess, like educational bits and pieces for healthcare professionals around the world. So we had to work with like international medical experts, and we were making things like e-learning materials or conference presentations or things like helping to write things like journal articles. So it was wildly different to being a software engineer. Yeah, and I did that for probably about 10 years before I changed careers.
Nice. So yeah, very different, as you said, like wildly different.
Yeah.
And then, like I say, you did a boot camp. What was the reason behind changing career, entering tech, and also more specifically, deciding to do a boot camp?
Yeah, so I the reason for changing careers into tech, I think it was sort of like a bit of a push, really. So I was unfortunately made redundant from my job, and then I had a decision to make, and the decision was, do I go back and do something that I'd done sort of earlier on in my career, so the medical communication side of things, which I hadn't really enjoyed, or do I do something completely different? And I'd done a little bit of Python programming sort of between jobs previously. I'm not very good at sitting still. So if I've got 2 weeks between jobs, I'm going to learn how to program an ATM with Python. So I was like, oh, I found that really interesting. And I love solving problems, like if or like doing escape rooms, things like that. Anything where you have to sort of like work something out and figure out an answer. So I was like, oh, is this sort of the opportunity that I've been given to finally give this a go, um, and take a real crack at it. So I think I just decided like, yes, this is. And one of the ways to do that I found was to do a boot camp. And I sort of said to myself, if I do this, so I can't remember how many weeks it was, 13, 14-week boot camp, and I hate it, well, then it's only, 13, 14 weeks of my life, and I can just find something else. And if I love it, then, I've got these skills that I've now learned under my belt, and I can go and find a job in this new career. So, yeah, and I think I wanted the sort of structure of a boot camp, and the one that I chose specifically, North Coders, that was, I think it was like 8:30 till 5, Monday to Friday. So it was like being in a job, and they had the option at the time to go in person as well, which I really liked because I think it's nice to be around other people physically, like doing the same thing. And actually, some of the friends that I made on the boot camp I still have now. So I think, yeah, that was the right decision.
Yeah, I think that in-person element, if you can get it in a boot camp, is so important because also learning a new skill, and not just coding, like it can be a hobby, particularly if you're doing it by yourself, can be really like lonely and isolating. So actually, I can imagine that those in-person elements of the boot camp were really comforting to also be around the other people that were also doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like there's quite a nice camaraderie, especially if you're all sort of like struggling through the same problem and you can all get around one laptop physically. There's just something about that that is quite nice. So I would say the it was split, and there's probably maybe like, I don't know, say 20, 30% of us that did go into the office in inverted commas, whilst the rest of the people stayed online. But the fact that they had the option, I thought was really nice.
Yeah, I think that is really nice. And like you say, I can imagine just the idea of all of you getting behind and all like around a computer to just solve a problem is actually really satisfying. And like you say, comforting as well. Like sometimes when you're having these coding problems, they can be so frustrating. And if you're just at home trying to do it by yourself, like I don't know, I'd want to like pick up my laptop and just throw it across the room.
Yeah.
So actually, if you're, like if you're all kind of together, you can do it yourself. And I know one of the things I think is really important about that is even though you're all going through this same journey, actually everyone has different experience, different knowledge. Like I can imagine there's this really nice element where actually you can really help each other, even though you are doing the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like there was such a broad mix of like previous skills on the boot camp, and people with like wildly different backgrounds. So one of my really good friends, Yusuf, that I met on the boot camp, he used to be, oh gosh, I'm gonna get this wrong now. It's like a network engineer or something like that. And one of my other friends, Charlie, they'd been, I think, building websites themselves since they were like 14 or something, but had used a different tech stack to the one they were using on the boot camp. And I think someone else had worked in like operations for a startup. But what you found was, as you went through the boot camp, different people's previous skills would become really useful at different points, and you could draw on all those different things, as we were going through. So that was one of the really nice things I think about doing the boot camp.
And actually, there's something there that I think is really important, which is the amazingness of career switches. We get a lot of people at codebar that career switch and they think, oh, well, none of my skills previously are useful. But actually, what you've just said and highlighted, which I think is so important, is that actually there are so many transferable skills when you're a career switcher that, yes, it could be a different industry, but all that knowledge and experience is so valuable and 100% transferable.
Absolutely. And actually, as kind of, I guess, testament to that. So after I came out of the boot camp, sorry, this is like jumping ahead a little bit.
No, that's
Um,
okay. I love it.
before before I got the job that I have now at the Bennett Institute, I very briefly, and I mean like for, I want to say 2 months, worked for a data and AI startup called Foil. And they specifically, for their kind of entry level junior roles, they specifically hired career changers because they saw so much value in having people that had had completely different backgrounds, and they saw how important that was in terms of the skills that they could bring to the roles that were completely outside of, I guess, a technical or a typical technical skill set. So I think it, like I recognize it, the people in the boot camps recognize it, but also I think employers do recognize it too, and it's really nice to see that.
That's so nice to see rather than sometimes you see these job adverts and they just require like a computer science degree and that's it. Whereas, yeah, I just think the importance of those transferable skills are so valuable. So it's so wonderful, that you joined a company that also valued that. I think so thinking of that transition, and these transferable skills, are there any that you can think of from you that you went, do you know what? That was one of my transferable skills that you had. Can you think of any?
Um, I think, yeah, there are definitely some that come to mind. So I would say like organization and project management, those kinds of things, particularly when you're doing a boot camp and some of the work is kind of self-directed and you have to be quite disciplined, especially if you have, another job at the weekend and you're trying to do all your life admin and family care and you, for example, sell your flat outside of this boot camp and your other job and whatnot. So you need to be organized, you need to be quite disciplined, you need to be quite a good project manager of your boot camp work, but also of your life outside of that. And I would also say, super, super important, communication skills. I feel like they in tech are are really important because at least in my tech role now, I'm constantly talking to other people, whether that be other people who are engineers on my team or the team leaders, so people at more management level or cross function. So talking to product, talking to the service team, talking to the researchers that use the platform that we build. And then back on the boot camp, you're talking to people from all different sort of walks of life and experiences, and everybody's got, different knowledge and experience levels, and you have to be able to sort of cross all of those bridges and barriers and find a common language that everybody understands and speaks together. So yeah, I'd say communication skills were also pretty valuable in the boot camp and also in my job now.
It's why often, if you see them on job ads, people will call them like soft skills. But actually, I actually really
Mm,
like to call, yeah, well, I actually like to call them core skills because I do
yeah,
think there's often a lot of technical stuff. Like I got my first job not knowing Git like 13 years ago as a developer. And I think something like that is actually really easily taught. But communication is actually something that's harder to teach. And like you
yeah,
said, so many of those skills, project management, time management, communication, all of those core skills are so much more difficult to teach than the latest React documentation, or like I say, in my case, like teaching Git. Like, that's relatively easy actually to teach in hindsight, but not those core skills.
yeah. I 100% agree, and I definitely also agree with referring to them as core skills rather than soft skills. Yeah, I think that's a much better way to phrase them.
So I want to quickly talk about something because something you mentioned earlier, which was the ATM in Python. I want to quickly ask about that because I'm just so intrigued. Like you say, you kind of you said you dabbled with Python, but then you just casually dropped that in, and now I'm just really intrigued about
Oh.
more about this project.
It was, I feel like I've definitely oversold it, sorry, with the way that I've described it there then. It was just I think it was like a discrete code academy project or something, and it was like use Python to build an ATM. And when I say ATM, it was like a very basic program or script that you requested you requested some money and it either told you that there weren't enough funds or that you could have the money and then it withdrew them for you. It wasn't anything very, very glamorous.
Oh.
Like I said, it was like 2 weeks between jobs. But yeah, it gave me, I guess, a very, very basic taste of writing a bit of code to, yeah, to perform a function, I guess.
And
Yeah.
did you have a friend that was learning to code, someone close to you? Because I don't know, I can't imagine I would have just randomly picked up Python between jobs. So did
Mm.
you know someone who was doing it that made you pick it up?
No, but I am I am a really big nerd, Kimberly. So I think that's just kind of the, I have a break between jobs. I'm either gonna, yeah, like pick up a new skill or pick up some kind of new hobby. I'm really bad at sitting still. So I need something to occupy my brain. And yeah, it just so happens that this particular time I decided to learn a bit of Python.
Oh, well, I love it. Yeah, I think I love it. Talk to me about your role today. You said you're a junior software engineer. Yeah, talk me through, what it is that the premise of what you're doing today, basically.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a junior software engineer at the Bennett Institute for Applied Data Science, University of Oxford. And we're a multidisciplinary team. So we're software engineers, clinicians, program and information governance folks, and academic researchers. And we work on sort of building and maintaining a suite of different tools and services, and they allow people to do safe and secure research on medicines data and primary healthcare record data in the UK. And then you can publish research off the back of that.
And so, how did you find that process of, say, you've done the boot camp doing JavaScript and then
Mhm.
this new job was Python? How did you find learning this new language on the job?
Challenging. I think there's broad concepts that you can draw across with different programming languages. Everything's going to have a way to like loop over something, or store data, or print or log to the console, for example. But actually learning the syntax was quite challenging. I will say when I started, they were very good at giving me the time that I needed to learn things like that. They also hired two other junior developers at the same time as me, although their experience and background was quite different to mine. So they were they were good at giving us the time that we needed to train up to where we needed to be. But I did find it quite tough. And actually, I remember calling my mum, I think in like my first week at the job, and being like, have I made a really big mistake? Because this is hard. And like I don't know if this is like if I'm gonna be able to do this. But she was, I mean, she's like one of my biggest supporters, but she's like, no, you definitely should be there, stay there. There's nothing that you can't do. So yeah, I stuck it out. And as I said, they were incredibly supportive, and we got lots of resources, lots of time. Like everyone got assigned a buddy, sort of like a mentor, I guess, who gave a lot of one-on-one time to help bring those skills up to scratch as well. So yeah, I'd say it was tough, but there was the support there when I needed
That sounds really wonderful. And what great advice from your mum as well. I think
it.
sometimes you just need your mum just to give you that
Yeah.
reassurance and be like, come on, it'll be okay. Like you've got this. So I think that's so lovely.
Yeah, I mean, she still does that now. She's amazing.
Oh, and so there might be people listening to this who are also career switchers, who may be going through, they may be in the middle of that boot camp at the moment, or they may be thinking about doing that transition.
Mhm.
What advice would you have for that person listening right now?
I'd say definitely have a look at the options that are on the table to help you switch careers, because whilst boot camps are great, so I did a full-time boot camp for, like I think I said 13, 14 weeks. That's not the only way to do it. And that was, I would say that was also quite tricky. So I was newly single. I had a mortgage, I had bills. I ended up having to get a part-time job at the weekends. So I was working 8:30 till 5 on the boot camp, and then at the weekends I was doing Saturday, Sunday, 9 to 5 at an admin job. So I was working 7 days a week for a sustained period of time, and that's hard when you have life going on outside of that. So what I would say is it's not the only way, and you don't have to do it that way. There are part-time boot camps, I believe, that you could do. Also look if you can get government funding. And there are also now, I don't know what the term is, you might know, Kimberly, but you can do like employer-sponsored boot camps where employer pays for it, and then potentially at the end you also get the chance to interview for a job, I believe. So I think definitely research your options and yeah, have a take a bit of time to plan, because even if you do a boot camp, and this again is from my experience, that does not guarantee you will get a job at the end of it if one isn't absolutely sort of like written in a contract somewhere that you will. Plan to have 6, 12 months potentially unemployed and searching for a job, and just make sure that you've got your own back covered before you do jump in. That sounds very serious, but I think it's a really big step and a really big thing to sort of overhaul your career and jump into. So you do want to be prepared for it, I would say.
No, and I think the reality of it is important. Like you say, it is a big overhaul, it's a big financial investment. Obviously, you can get funding, that's great, but like you say, there are avenues where actually you may be unemployed for a period of time. And we've spoken about it a few times in this podcast, but the job market is tricky for junior developers at the moment. For every job, there could be 100 applicants. So I think, yeah, I think that advice is spot on and also realistic as well. So I think it was great.
I would also say, actually, just another thing I just thought of that I did. So when I graduated from the boot camp, there were, I think, 150 of us in that cohort. And actually, as part of the boot camp's career scheme that they had at the end to help sort of support you into employment, I think they had about 8 jobs on their jobs board. So it was immediately evident that there was going to be, even within the boot camp situation, which we thought would make things a bit easier, there was already going to be competition for a really limited number of roles. So I looked at doing other things other than doing, like personal projects and things like that. So I reached out to people that I knew who worked in tech. I had a friend that worked for, it's like an SEO agency, but they had a tech department, and she set me up with a 1 week internship. I sat with their tech team and just went in and did some like web dev stuff. But then that meant I had at least the experience of sort of working in an agency, and I could talk about that when I got to interview. So it's like thinking outside of the box on, how you can set yourself apart in order to try and get your foot in the door somewhere as well.
It's exactly right. Like you say, there's 150 of you and only 8 jobs. So how do you really make yourself stand out? That's kind of like the tricky bit. If everyone's done the same course, there are so many other ways that
Hmm.
unfortunately, you do really have to make yourself stand out. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Okay, so you spoke about ways in which you can make yourself stand out, and I do know
Mhm.
codebar is one of those ways. And I know you've been attending codebar also for a while. How did you find out about us? Like, how did you discover us?
Whilst I was on the boot camp, I was looking for tech meetups in Manchester to go and meet some other people who were already developers, because I'd heard, and I can't pinpoint the exact reference, but I'd heard that in tech, network is really important. And it's about like who you know and knowing other people in a similar industry. And I would stand by that now as an engineer. But I was looking for meetups to go to. And also the boot camp didn't have sort of out of hours support in terms of like people to go to for questions. You might be sort of halfway through trying to debug something, and then they'd shut the office at 5 and you'd be like, oh well, I still need help, where do I go? So one of the things that I was looking for was also somewhere that I could get, I guess, out of hours support. And I think through doing those searches, I came across codebar, and that would literally have been me typing into Google like tech meetups in Manchester, or like tech support, tech support in Manchester, or something silly like that. Anyway, that's how I found codebar, and I went to my first one during the tech boot camp, and it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. It was brilliant. They were, I don't know how the others run, but it was 2.5 hours at the time. It was a person called Michael Johnson, I think, that was running them. And yeah, it was just this like safe, supportive environment to basically take whatever I've been working on and go, I have no idea. Please, can someone help me? And there were all these really lovely coaches who were just like, do you know what? We've been there. Let's work through it together. And then by the end of the evening, you fixed your problem. You've spoken to another engineer and you just feel so much better than when you first arrived. I know that people use codebar for lots of different things, but I was certainly taking debugging problems and like, I need to build this thing, but I'm unsure how. Can you help me? Those types of things. And yeah, I got so much support, and I don't think I'll ever, like, I can still remember now the people that helped me and what they helped me with. So it had a really big impact, and I think it's such an incredible organization. So thank you from me for that. And I think that's why it was so special to be a speaker, because I was like, you helped me right from the start. And then I was able to kind of come back as an engineer and be like, actually, your model works. Look, I'm here and I did it. So yeah, thank you for that to Codebar.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I think that's the loveliest way to end this podcast episode. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. I think it's so important to share all these different stories of how people enter tech. So, yeah, thank you so much for being on the episode today, Katie.
Well, thank you for having me, Kimberly. It's been great.